Welcome to part 3 of this mini-series where I take some of the steps of my guitar building process that have caused me problems and attempt to improve them. Last time we glued the neck block to the sides, the join wasn't as perfect as I would have liked. We have cut a wedge off this end to match the curve of the back, and I've cut off a wedge along this edge matching the angle where the inside of the cutaway meets the end. However, that piece of cutaway has a slight curve to it, and this edge is perfectly straight. Last time we scooped that out using the spindle of my belt sander and then some sandpaper wrapped around something like this. It wasn't perfect because this radius is way too tight and I want something much more gradual. So I've made myself a sanding block with a much more subtle and gentle curved side. So let's see if we can put a scoop along this edge so that it perfectly fits snug into the curve of the back and the incoming inside cutaway. We weren't really getting anywhere. This is a mixture of end grain and lengthwise grain hardwood, and this just wasn't strong enough to do serious material removal. So I resorted to the spindle of my belt sander. I got a little bit of belt burn for my effort, and we're now sort of in the ballpark, and I think I'm just going to be using this to finesse it to the final curve that we want rather than to get there from scratch. Getting there. As you may recall, last time I went a little bit too far and had to glue on a shim, and that actually made the job easier because it just had some cross-grain wood. It was much easier to shape than this mixture of end grain and cross grain. I used a round-backed file to kind of even up some of the material removal. So this tool does allow us to get to the final stage, but it's not really all that good for starting from scratch. So we'll note that down, but after a little bit of extra work that you didn't see me do, this looks like a very good fit indeed. So let's glue it up. Speaking of which, last time we glued neck blocks and access port frames to the sides. The Solera mould was rolling and tipping and wobbling back and forth because of the weight of the clamps. So I built myself this holder. I actually made it wider than it needs to be for my guitars because I also want to use it for my basses, and the Solera mould for my bass is wider than the one for my regular guitars. So a little piece like this, in goes the Solera mould, and we can tighten it up, and now I can glue and clamp away without it tipping over. Here's another little difference from the way I did things last time. I've decided experimentally not to worry quite so obsessively about the curve at the tail end of the guitar, and to clamp the inner layer of the access port cover outside the Solera mould. That means that I can pop out the cover once I've clamped it up. The cover is needed, of course, for the alignment of the two layers. The other thing I've done is press the riser from my Go Bar deck into use as a steadying cradle with a little piece of pine that's just wedged into that internal gap to hold the guitar frame steady. So once again, it's not tipping over all over the place. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to have worked. Every time we laminate another layer, the piece becomes more and more inflexible, and it appears that the curve on the access port cover and the access port frame subtly diverges more and more. And when it comes time to fitting them together, they don't. In all of these builds I have had to sand away on the inside edge and shim a piece at the ends and all sorts of things that I don't really want to do. So next time I'm going to have to find a way to clamp the cover and the frame together at every lamination step and find another way to prevent squeeze out from gluing them together permanently. Stay tuned, we'll find out what actually does work.